In this video, we're going to be breaking down the brand new Valorant patch tier list, breaking down all the best and worst agents that you should be playing or avoiding in this patch. Now, first off, we got to talk about the F tier, and there is really only one agent in the F tier right now, and that's Deadlock. Deadlock with a fat 0% pick rate right now in pro play. She's just incredibly underpowered, and the devs have already said that they will be buffing her in the future. So right now, it's really not a great time to be grinding this character when the devs already understand how weak she is, and we would really suggest you not lock her in right now in your rank games if you want to give yourself the best chance to climb, although learning her a little bit right now could pay dividends if she gets really buffed later on, but her abilities might also be dramatically different, so keep that in mind. Now, next up, we do got to talk about the D tier, and these are characters that are fine, or they're only specifically good in ranked play. They're not characters that are going to be good in coordinated play, or there are some really big problems with these characters. Now, the first character we got to talk about is Sage, and Sage is just rather weak right now. She's not unplayable by any means, and she's actually fairly fine in ranked, but unfortunately right now, with her only good map Icebox out of the map pool, she's just not really that great, and there are other sentinels that are just better in her slot, and in a lot of cases you would rather run double or initiator, or even just rock an initiator duelist and just completely forgo the sentinel with a double controller setup altogether. This character could probably use some buffs here or there, and I do think that you could still get value out of her in ranked. There's nothing crazy wrong with her, she just is a little bit underpowered, and her kit doesn't fit perfectly for many of the maps in the map pool like some of the other sentinels do, so she's all the way down here in the D tier. Now, next up, we do gotta talk about three characters that are all great in ranked play, but they're not fantastic in pro play right now. Reyna with a 4% pick rate. She is just one of the best characters actually for ranked play, and the thing about Reyna actually is that even though she doesn't really work great in coordinated play, if you want to climb to a really high rank, you can climb very easily on Reyna, and we actually have a brand new Reyna guide that will teach you how to carry on Reyna in minutes, so you're definitely going to want to check it out right now down below. Also, we do got to talk about Chamber, and Chamber is another character that is really good, especially in rank. If you are just a god, like if you're able to hit your consistent shots with your operator, if you're able to hit your consistent shots with the deagle that he pulls out, you're going to get a lot of value on Chamber overall, like just consistently. But unfortunately, when you compare him to the power level of some of the other sentinels and a lot of the other compositions, he does fall a little bit flat. He can be great in a ranked situation if you're just really good, but for pro play in particular, he's not really seeing hardly any play, only sitting at about a 6% pick rate, so he's sitting at that D tier. Last up in the D tier, we do got to talk about Phoenix, and I will say that Phoenix is fantastic in ranked play. I've said this many times before. He's a absolute powerhouse ranked play. He has even a very high win rate, even in Radiant. That's how good he is in ranked play. If you're playing ranked, Phoenix is legitimately like an A tier agent, but in coordinated play, unfortunately, he falls behind. So just because you don't see him in pro play doesn't mean you can't play him in ranked, and just because he's a D tier here, where I have to put him here because objectively in the meta he is weaker than some of the other options, but in the chaotic nature that is ranked, he gives you so much agency over your wins and losses if you're good with him, that he definitely is a character that could be deserving of a higher placement on a specifically ranked or like solo carry tier list, but on the overall meta tier list, he definitely deserves this D tier spot with only a 6% pick rate right now. Now, let's move on to the C tier, and these are characters that are actually legitimately good in the meta. They also are good in ranked play, and there are situations where you can get value with them, or there are situations that it can be a little bit tricky to, depending on the map or depending on the combos that you will have with your composition. So the first character that we have at a 7% pick rate is actually Neon, and it's interesting because Neon is seeing quite a bit of Breeze pick rate right now, and I do think that Neon could actually go up in pick rate if more teams experiment with playing Neon on Breeze. But overall, this character does have some of the power to take over some of the lost percentage points by Jett, who definitely is suffering a hit after her really severe nerfs. But overall, this character is still a little bit niche, where there's many maps where she just can't see play. She needs like the right setup and the right team coordination in order to make her work, and really I do think that she's a little bit hard to get working perfectly in a coordinated setting at all, just because of the timing. It's pretty hard to set her up perfectly, but for ranked play, she can be an absolute monster if you learn her movement, so I do think that she is a bit better than this placement if we just did a ranked tier list, but overall still a pretty good placement in that C tier. Now next up, surprisingly, we have Yoru climbing to a 9% pick rate. This character is slowly creeping up that pick rate. He's not unplayable right now, and some teams are actually experimenting with him here or there. And honestly, Yoru just has such a high ceiling that he can be so powerful in the right hands. We've already talked about many times in ranked play, if you master him, he has a very high win rate, but if you aren't good with him, he just has one of the lowest win rates in the game. So it's really a character that you have to put a lot of time into to fully learn. For ranked play, that is basically in your hands. You're going on a lot of solo missions and you're really trying to master him mechanically. But for coordinated play, the problem with Yoru is oftentimes the timing. He does have really hard timing problems with your team, and it's really tricky to get him to work perfectly unless your team perfectly know your habits on Yoru and you got the timing and the strategy down. And it's really why he hasn't seen a lot of pro play up to this point. Still a very strong character though, and definitely deserving of the C tier. Next up, we do got to talk about Kayo. Kayo falling all the way down to a 9%. Not really seeing that much play currently right now. Mainly only seeing play on Ascent, and I do think that he's actually a bit better than this in the overall pick rate with more data. But currently, he's falling a little bit out of favor. Still a very strong character, but right now the pro pick rate just doesn't reflect that. And especially for ranked play, I wanted to put him a little bit lower than normal because he's just not really a great ranked character to pick up and play right now. It's pretty hard to get the full value out of him in ranked play. He's better in coordinated play. So while I do think he's actually a bit better than this, you know, C tier 9% pick rate in a full, more contextual pro meta, in ranked, he is definitely a bit lower. So I'm just going to kind of average him and put him here. Still think he's a fine character. He's just a little bit difficult to make work and get the full value out of unless you do your due diligence, have teammates that are willing to play around you, and learn those lineups. That's kind of what's really the necessary thing for you to do, especially on Ascent. But yeah, still a solid character, and I expect to see him getting a little bit more pick rate up with time, although the initiator slot, as you'll see in a little while, is very competitive right now, so we'll have to wait and see. Next up, in the last character in the C tier, we do got to talk about Cypher, and Cypher is actually seeing a little bit of play on Split, a little bit of play on Bind, and actually a little bit of play on Sunset, which is a bit surprising. But overall, Cypher is just a pretty interesting character. I don't think that he's necessarily weak right now, but there's a couple of things that are kind of working against him, namely the fact that there's a character that is just really strong, like almost better than him in most ways in Killjoy, and there's other characters that see a lot of play, like Raze, that feel like natural counters to Cypher. So really, there's a couple things that are working against him in particular, and I still think it's impressive that he's getting at least this amount of pick rate, but they're kind of buffing him already slightly. But if they buffed him a little bit more, or if Killjoy got some dramatic nerfs, then perhaps Cypher's time to shine would be here, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Next off, we're moving up to the B tier. These are characters that are both good in ranked play and seeing consistent meta tier play, but maybe they fall out of favor right now, or they're just certain maps that just favor them more than others. First up, we got to talk about Sova right now, and Sova is a character that does see some decent play on Ascent and Haven, but he is falling a little bit out of favor when compared to some of the other initiators right now. Specifically, Fade is seeing the most play on Sunset. When a new map gets added to the map pool and then Fade kind of eats that up, it's really kind of hurting Sova in particular. And something that's actually surprising is teams are experimenting a bit more with Skye on Breeze, so Sova is falling a little bit down below. Now, I definitely think that the meta is ever changing right now, and it's very possible that Sova kind of ramps right back up, but still, with all the competition in the initiator category, with Fade getting some extra juice with the map pool rotation, with Skye still seeing some play and being good on some of the maps that Sova's good in, there is some extra competition for some slots in the compositions of your team. So overall, I think that Sova's still really great. He's still a fantastic character. He's still really phenomenal for ranked, but for coordinated and pro play, there just are a lot of options, and teams are definitely experimenting with the initiator role. There are more initiators right now that are viable than there have been in a while, so it really makes it hard for you to just kind of lock down which one. Speaking of which, there's two other initiatives we got to talk about back to back. First off, let's talk about Breach, baby. And Breach is still a really strong character at doing a very certain type of strategy. He's mainly good for coordinated play, better than ranked play, especially on maps like Haven in particular, especially with Fracture out of the map pool. Unfortunately, he's kind of falling down a little bit in pick rate, but still, he's a phenomenal character if you're rocking that duo, if you can set up that duelist, if you can really enable somebody ability to just take space and be aggressive and get trades out. All in all, this character is still a character that needs conditions, right? He's very map centric and he's also very duo centric. So I think that even though he's amazing on the situations he's good in and on the maps he's good in, he's just not played that much and he doesn't have that much variety in the maps he's played on. So yeah, I'm putting him down here in the B tier. And then next up, we do got to talk about Gecko. And Gecko is a character that is slowly creeping up, right? He's seeing a little bit of play on Sunset, a little bit of Breeze, a little bit of play on maps like Haven, and he's actually creeping up. More and more pick rate, time goes on. And he's a character, especially when you can set up the rotations to get utility, make sure that you're getting full value out of each and every one, and you're patient on the character, you're gonna get good value on the character, especially if you really learn to master him. And something that we actually have on the SkillCapped website is our brand new Gecko guide that breaks down exactly how you should play him and how to master him very quickly. So you should definitely go check it out if you want to climb with Gecko, because you could be one of the first people to ever master him. Check it out right now down below. Moving on to the next character that we have in the B tier, we have Harbor. And Harbor is a great character, but only in a double controller setup. So I always give him a high rank with like a little asterisk where he's like, yeah, he's great, but for pro play specifically, he's not going to be that good for ranked play unless you're really setting up like a dual controller setup and you're doing it intentionally with like a duo, or you're like in a high elo. But if you're in a high elo, you already know this stuff. So really, yeah, it's like important for you to understand that he's not like a solo controller, and I don't think he ever will be in his current state. So just keep that in mind. He could be good in some situations if you are rocking that dual controller setup and you know what you're doing, but for that solo controller, it's going to be really, really hard to make him work. Now, next up, we do got to talk about Brim, and Brim is rounding out the B tier as just like a freaking monster on Bind. He doesn't see that much play on every map, and unfortunately right now, one of his best maps, Fracture, is not here, but he is just still a complete powerhouse on Bind. And I think in ranked play, he's just one of the most consistent and reliable controllers ever. He just gets so much value at denying pushes. He gets so much value at helping his team with smokes. He's easy to learn. The smokes are easy to place. He can allow you to run really fast executes, and I especially think his post plant is super strong. But one of the things that you got to make sure to master is his post plant lineups, but thankfully we have every single one of them on the SkillCapped website, so if you want to know his lineups, you can check them out down below. Now let's move on to the A tier. Specifically, these are characters that are stables in the meta, the best characters right now, and are really making a dent, and there are quite a few of them. First off, let's talk about Astra. Astra's seeing a lot of play on maps like Lotus and Split right now. This character is another character that really can't be played in a solo controller setup, but she is very, very strong, and I do think that she's actually a bit stronger than Harbor on average. You actually could technically play her in a solo controller setup on some of the Dome Smoker maps like Ascent and Bind, and it would be fine. I don't think it would be optimal, but it would definitely be fine if you're really good with her. But if you do get that double controller setup and you're really good on this character, you can have some crazy high impact, and she's really warping the meta around her at the highest levels and in pro play. So definitely keep an eye on her. Don't sleep on her. She's really, really strong, and oftentimes you're going to get more utility out of her than adding something more traditional to your comp like an extra duelist or an extra initiator. Just rock the double controller and you're going to win a lot of games for free. Next off in the A tier, we got to talk about Fade. I did mention her, how she's really picking up pick rates, specifically on Sunset. She seems like a really natural fit for that map, and Lotus is also just an amazing map for Fade as well. At a 31% pick rate right now, she's doing really, really well for herself, and I do think that Fade is kind of a character that proves that you don't necessarily need a super buff characters for them to see play. You just need to understand that some characters have maps that they're good in, and depending on how the map pool changes and depending on what maps get introduced, all of a sudden a character that is sub tier, you know, C tier, right, with half the pick rate doubles in pick rate, right? All you have to have is like one map that you're bad in to rotate out and one map that you're good in to rotate in or get added in, and all of a sudden, boom, a character is really, really sick right now. So just keep that in mind. A lot of these characters are actually fairly balanced. Like Valorant is a fairly balanced game. Most characters are pretty close together in value, and that's all it takes for things to shift around. So yeah, and this is just proof of that right here with Fade all of a sudden jumping up to an A tier just with a couple of changes that don't really even have to do with Fade herself. She just fits the meta and fits the map pool a bit more. Now next up, we do got to talk about Jett. Jett's still kind of popping off, kicking ass with high pick rates in Split, Ascent, maps like Haven, and she is definitely weaker than she was before. There are definitely repercussions for her changes, but it's by no means killing her, and it's mainly just the characters that already had a lot of pick rate are kind of eating up a little bit more, and now there's also like more emphasis on double controller setups, because why would you try to play what is trying to break open some of these dirtily slow setups when that just got nerfed, because that was like kind of enabled by Jett, when now you can play like the anti-rush comps, know, the more strategic comps, the more strategy focused comps that rock on double controller and rock with ability use. So yeah, Jett is still really strong and is still a really strong character to enable like a push or a rush, or someone that can break through a lot of the slow utility double controller nonsense, but it's not as strong as it was before. So some of these other strategies are more optimal in the pro meta, but Jett's still going to be fantastic for ranked play. Now I'm actually skipping straight to S tier because I think all 5 of these agents deserve it, because they're kind of just like Hall of Famers right now. They're just really good, and yeah, you just can't really ignore them right now as just some of the best agents in the game. First off, we definitely got to talk about Killjoy. Max out pick rate on Lotus, really good on Ascent, pretty good on Sunset, good on Haven. Honestly, could probably pick up more pick rate on some other maps as well. She's just really strong. She's been very strong. The ultimate nerfs didn't do enough to her, and yeah, she's also just equally as strong in ranked play. Just an absolute powerhouse, one of the best characters you could be picking, definitely deserving of this high placement. Next off, at a slightly higher pick rate, we have Omen. I've talked many times about how Omen is super flexible both in ranked and pro play. The fact of the matter is he's just played on so many different maps: Haven, Sunset, Ascent, Split, Lotus, and it's actually interesting that he is played so much on Sunset, which is actually really good for the future, as he's seeing some dual controller setups on Sunset, which is actually pretty cool. And overall, I think this character is just one of the best characters to main and learn and play in the game, period. So yeah, definitely giving him high marks in the S tier. Next off, we do gotta talk about Skye, and Skye's still just amazing even after her nerfs. They weren't quite as severe as Jett's, and she was super strong, so she's still seeing maxed up on maps like Bind, Breeze, Split. She's still very good, and I imagine that she'll continue to be very good. So yeah, don't definitely sleep on Skye, and she's still a character worth learning right now as an S tier pick. Next off, the 2 super S tiers, Giga S tiers, just like the best characters to play right now. First off is Raze at like above 60% pick rate, which is crazy. Seeing play on Lotus, Split, Bind, Sunset, just an amazingly strong character that picks up a lot of the gap that Jett left behind, and was already seeing like a crazy high pick rate before all those things happened, and kind of just escaped untouched. Also at S tier, dominant pick rate and ranked play. My number 1 pick for anyone that wants to play a duelist and be aggressive. This character is just like everything you would ever want. You just got to make sure to practice your satchels, practice your movement, understand how to use your utility in consistent ways and not just flashy ways, and yeah, you're gonna be just fine on this character. But definitely the best agent in the meta right now is undoubtedly freaking Viper, with a fat over 70% pick rate. Seeing play on Lotus, Split, Bind, Sunset, Breeze. I mean, the map pool just favors her so freaking much right now. She doesn't have any competition because there is no line smoker that competes with her. Only Harbor is a other line smoker, but he cannot be a solo line smoker, and most of the time he's playing double controller with her or freaking Astra. So yeah, Viper is just necessary. If you're a controller player, you need to learn how to play her, and yeah, she's just one of the best characters to play, period. So yeah, don't sleep on her. But overall, this is the new patch tier list. Definitely let us know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns down below. Thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.